For months now, I have been seeing some strange headlines coming out of Zambia, and I'm trying not to talk about it because even I am confused on what to make of it. From the government dragging the body of a dead former president with family to jailing two men for attempting to unalive the sitting president with witchcraft. Now I have to ask, Zambians, what's really going on in your country? Okay, get this. Two guys get arrested with a live chameleon, some red clothes, a bunch of animal tails, and this weird white powder. Not the other kind of power. Now, this is the voodoo kind of powder. And they weren't arrested for drugs or theft. No, they were arrested for trying to kill the president of Zambia with witchcraft. And that's not even the craziest part of the story. At the exact same time, Zambia's last president, Edgar Lungu, is lying unburied in a morgue in South Africa months after he died. His family wants to bury him privately, but the government is demanding his body be flown back to the capital, Lusaka, for a full state funeral. A court has even sided with the government of Zambia, but the body is still in the morgue. So naturally, the rumors are out of control. Some people are now saying the government wants to use his corpse for some kind of occult ritual. Others says it's just a raw power play. But the deeper you look, the weirder this all gets. And I ask again, Zambians, what's going on? And look, this isn't just about old beliefs or traditions. This is a political earthquake shaking the entire country. The current president, Hakainde Hichilema, is already getting hit for cracking down on his opponents. But now, his critics are saying he's using old-school colonial era witchcraft laws to shut people up and distract everyone from the real problems at hand. A law written by the British back in 1914 is being used today in 2025 to put people in jail for sorcery. All across Zambia and beyond, social media is just blowing up. You've got young Zambians on TikTok asking why these ancient colonial laws are still running their lives. The international news is treating it like a funny headline, but a lot of Africans are seeing something much darker going on. Is this all just political drama, or is something more sinister happening behind the scenes? This story is about how 79% of Zambians still believe in witchcraft, how a law from 1914 can still land you in prison, and how politicians all over Africa are still using supernatural fears to hold on to power. So in this episode, we are diving deep into how witchcraft became a political weapon, how a dead president's body became a battlefield, and why everything happening in Zambia right now needs to be put into proper perspective. Let's break it all down. So, how exactly do you try to kill a sitting president with a chameleon? This isn't some kind of old fairy tale. This is happening right now in Zambia, where two men were just sentenced to prison for doing exactly that, all thanks to a witchcraft law from 1914. The story starts on December 20th, 2024. Staff at a hotel in Lusaka hear some strange noises from one of the rooms. The police shows up and finds two guys, Leonard Fury, a 43-year-old Zambian, and Justin Kandunde, a 42-year-old from Mozambique. And with them, police found what they called witchcraft materials. We are talking about a live chameleon in a bottle, red clothes, animal tails, that weird white powder, and a bunch of bottles filled with who knows what. But this is where it gets absolutely wild. In court, Fury apparently showed the investigators exactly how the ritual was supposed to work. He demonstrated how pricking the chameleon's tail at the right moment would supposedly kill the target within 5 days. And the target, President Hakainde Hichilema himself. Prosecutors said that a guy named Nelson Banda, who's the brother of a fugitive ex-politician, hired these two guys. The deal was a payout of over 2 million Zambian kwacha, which is about $80,000, to bewitch the sitting president. There were even confessions that the final price for the supernatural hit job was over $1 million. So on September 14, 2025, the judge handed the verdict. 2 years in prison with hard labor under that old 1914 Witchcraft Act. The judge said, and I quote, "It is my considered view that the convicts were not only the enemy of the head of state, but also enemies of all Zambians." Now, the crazy thing about this colonial law is that it doesn't even care if witchcraft is real. It makes it a crime to pretend to exercise spiritual powers calculated to cause fear, annoyance, or injury. So the question in court wasn't, are these guys actual wizards? It was, did they claim to have magic powers? But just as these guys are heading to prison for a supernatural crime, another supernatural drama is unfolding. A former president is dead, and his family is refusing to let the government bury him because they think the state wants to use his body for black magic. Edgar Lungu has been dead for 3 months, but he still hasn't been buried. His body is literally trapped in a South African morgue while 2 governments fight over it. His widow claims the current president wants to use her husband's body for witchcraft. The government says that's insane. Somebody is lying, but who? Here is the timeline. On June 5th, 2025, former President Edgar Lungu dies in a hospital in Pretoria, South Africa. He was only 68 years old when he died. What should have been a normal state funeral has turned into this ugly legal war that just shows how much Lungu and his successor, President Hichilema, hated each other. The Zambian government says Lungu is a former president and he deserves a state burial in Lusaka, where all the other presidents are buried. But Lungu's family, led by his wife Esther, are flat out refusing. They say Lungu's dying wish was that President Hichilema should not be allowed anywhere near his funeral. Then, on August 7th, a court in Pretoria, South Africa, sided with the Zambian government and ordered the family to immediately surrender the body. You can just feel the emotion in the courtroom. Lungu's sister, Beta, just broke down crying, but the real drama is what's spreading online. Because on WhatsApp groups, on Facebook, everywhere, supporters of Lungu's political party are pushing this weird narrative that the government wants the body for occult reasons. They are claiming that officials want to use Lungu's remains in rituals to make the sitting president, Hichilema himself, more powerful. President Hichilema has denied it over and over. He went on national TV and said, "Personally, I don't believe in witchcraft. Never believed in witchcraft as a person, as a family, and as a Christian." But the rumors just won't die because so many people in Zambia believe that human remains hold real spiritual power. So you've got 2 completely separate stories, both accusing the same president of being involved in witchcraft. Is this just a coincidence, or is there something much deeper going on in Zambia that connects magic to political power? Now, Zambians, you guys have a lot of explaining to do. Now, to figure this out, we have to go back to over 100 years. So, how is it possible that a law written by British colonizers in 1914 is still sending people to prison in Zambia today? Well, this Witchcraft Act was basically from colonial arrogance, because back then, the British administrators saw all of Africa's traditional healing, spiritual beliefs, and local knowledge as a threat to their control. They needed a way to outlaw these practices without actually admitting they believed in them. So they created these laws that punish anyone for just pretending to have a supernatural power. And the way they wrote the law was honestly pretty clever in a really twisted way. You couldn't be charged for actually being a witch, because that would mean the British government was officially saying witchcraft is real. Instead, you got arrested for professing knowledge of witchcraft or pretending to exercise supernatural powers. This let them crush African traditions while still acting like they were the superior, rational Europeans. This legal trick spread all across British-controlled Africa. I'm talking about Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, you can name it. They all got similar laws. The goal was basically cultural genocide, just dressed up to look like modern law. And here is the twisted part. These laws were supposed to die with colonialism, but they didn't. Instead, they became the perfect tool for new African governments to control their own people. Today in Zambia, Tanzania, and even Nigeria, and all across the African continent, these colonial witchcraft laws are still in the books 111 years later. Gankamani Moyo, a lecturer at the University of Zambia, just put it perfectly. He said, "I hate that colonial piece of legislation that attempts to outlaw a practice it does not understand. Traditional Zambian societies believe in a strong relationship between the human world and the supernatural." A lawyer, Dixon Jere, says that using this law is actually very rare, and it's usually just to protect older women from being attacked by mobs if they are accused of being witches. But using it to go after people who are allegedly threatening the president, now that's taking it to a whole new political level. But here is the statistics that changes everything. 79% of Zambians today still believe witchcraft is real. So these aren't just old laws on paper. They are tangled up in what millions of people truly believe. And when those beliefs crash with modern politics, things get really explosive. So what happens when almost 8 out of every 10 people in your country believe in supernatural powers? But the guy in charge, the president, goes on TV and says, "I don't believe in witchcraft." You get a country where ancient spirits become modern political weapons. The numbers are clear. A 2018 study confirmed it. 79% of Zambians believe in witchcraft, and this isn't just in remote villages. You've got traditional healers, guys like Rodwell Vongo or Dr. V, working out of nice suburbs in Lusaka with middle-class clients who want charms for protection or for their marriage. President Hilechima, on the other hand, is part of the modern educated elite. He calls these beliefs unscientific. He told journalists straight up, "I don't believe in witchcraft, never believed in witchcraft as a person, as a family, as a Christian." But that creates this huge gap between the leader and the people he's leading. And look, using witchcraft in politics isn't new in Zambia, because over a decade ago, the late President Michael Sata actually accused Hilechima himself, the current president, who was the opposition leader back then, of using magic, saying the magic from his home region was stronger. Hilechima never even bothered to respond to that. But now, the shoes is on the other foot. Hilechima's opponents are using these same fears to attack him. And isn't it convenient that the big witchcraft case involves Nelson Banda, the brother of a fugitive opposition figure? Critics say this is all just a show to distract people from the bad economy. The churches are even caught in the middle, because the Council of Churches in Zambia actually didn't want the witchcraft trial broadcast on TV, which shows you how carefully they have to walk the line between Christian faith and traditional beliefs. A lot of Zambians are Christians who also practice traditional spirituality at the same time. And of course, social media is pouring gasoline on this fire. Young Zambians are on TikTok and Instagram asking why these dusty old colonial laws are still a thing. The international news might find it funny, but Africans online see the bigger picture. They see a threat to democracy. But a lot of people are saying this isn't really about spirits or causes. It's a playbook, an authoritarian playbook. First, you dig up old forgotten laws to target your political opponents. Then, you turn people's deepest beliefs against them. Sounds familiar? From the last president crackdowns to today's witchcraft trials, Zambia's democracy is in trouble, and supernatural beliefs are the perfect smokescreen. Under the last president, Edgar Lungu, from 2015 to 2021, Zambia saw its democracy slide backward. A major newspaper, The Post, was shut down. A TV station had its license pulled. Opposition leaders were constantly harassed. Amnesty International called it a brutal crackdown, with at least 5 people killed by the police. When Hilechima won the election in 2021, everyone hoped things would change. He got rid of the death penalty and laws that made it a crime to insult the president. But critics are saying he's just swapping out the old tools of repression for new ones. He now has new cyber laws that could be used to silence people, and he's keeping colonial era laws like the Witchcraft Act on the books. The timing of all this is pretty suspicious too. This big witchcraft case blows up right as Hilechima is heading towards the 2026 elections, and it happens to involve his political opponent. The fight over Lungu's body is also taking up all the oxygen in the room while the economy struggles. A UN Special Rapporteur, Irene Khan, visited in January 2025 and said that the oppressive tools and tactics from the last government were being brought back to shut down criticism. Journalists have been arrested and attacked. One of the main opposition leaders was just sentenced to 18 months in prison for defaming the president, right after the president himself supposedly got rid of that very law. And the rest of the world is noticing. Freedom House now rates Zambia as only partly free because it's so hard for opposition parties to compete fairly. It's in this gap between the promise of democracy and the reality of authoritarian tactics that witchcraft accusation become the perfect political weapon. You see this pattern all over Africa. In Tanzania, they have witchcraft deportations. In Nigeria, people are persecuted for witchcraft. Governments use these traditional beliefs to go after their enemies, and old colonial laws give them the perfect legal cover. The 2026 elections are getting closer, and both sides are already throwing around accusations of witchcraft. But this isn't just about Zambia anymore. It's about a dangerous trend spreading across the continent, where old colonial laws and deep-seated beliefs are mixing in the worst way possible. From Tanzania deporting suspected witches, to Ghana's witch camps, to witch hunts in Nigeria, all across Africa, the dead hand of colonialism is still controlling people through their fear of the supernatural. Zambia isn't some weird exception. It's just the latest example of a crisis affecting the whole continent. In Tanzania, they updated their old 1922 witchcraft law, but they kept the power to deport people who are just suspected of being witches. Ghana has these camps where women who have been accused of witchcraft have to flee to for safety. Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, they all still have versions of these old colonial laws. And the legal logic is almost identical everywhere the British ruled. The colonial bosses wrote these laws to kill off African culture while making themselves look modern and civilized. Research from the University of Pretoria shows how colonial courts would even let people who murdered a witch get a lighter sentence because they saw the killers as unenlightened people acting out of fear. International human rights groups are finally starting to call this out. A UN expert on cultural rights, Alexander Zantaki, says that making traditional beliefs a crime is a form of discrimination. And when Africans living abroad see what's happening in Zambia, they don't see a quirky, weird news story. They see a bigger fight against the legacy of colonialism. The international media might laugh, but on Instagram and TikTok, you can hear Africans challenging that narrative. The fact that these laws still exist shows how little has really changed. African governments inherited a legal system designed to control them, and instead of throwing it all out, they just started using it for their own political games. Witchcraft laws are the perfect weapon. They seem to be about culture, but they are about real power. As one legal scholar, Dr. Kate Silika, says, Zambia's case shows how witchcraft accusations can be weaponized for political purposes, especially with an election coming up. So, what happens now? You've got two men in prison for supernatural crime. You have a former president's body stuck in a freezer, and the whole continent is watching to see if Zambia can finally break free from this colonial curse, or if the ghosts of the past are about to claim another democracy. So, to really get what's going on, you need to understand Zambia itself. It's this huge landlocked country right in the heart of Southern Africa, literally at the crossroads of 8 different nations. It's caught between ancient traditions and modern power games. With 22 million people, a ton of copper in the ground, and massive debt to China, This is a country where colonial witchcraft laws are real and where dead presidents are political pawns. Zambia's location is key. It's bordered by more countries than any other nation in Africa except for the DRC. Its butterfly shape is centered on these high plateaus. The capital, Lusaka, is home to about 1.3 million people, but almost half of the country lives in cities. And it's incredibly diverse. We are talking about 73 different ethnic groups speaking over 30 languages. Bemba is the most common, but you also hear a lot of Nyanja, Tonga, and Lozi. Only 2% of people speak English as their first language, but it's still the official language of the government, a colonial leftover, just like that 1914 Witchcraft Act. The economy runs on one thing: copper. Is the 7th largest producer in the world, and copper makes up over 70% of the country's exports. Since the late 90s, China has poured money into this sector, but it's created a dangerous dependency. By 2021, Zambia owed China something like $6.6 billion. In 2020, it became the first African nation to default on its debt. And that mining comes at a huge environmental cost, because just this year in February 2025, a Chinese-owned company spilled 50 million liters of acid waste into the Kufue River. It killed fish, destroyed crops, and poisoned the water for entire communities. Meanwhile, freedom of the press is getting worse, even though the government promised reforms. Journalists are getting arrested and harassed just for covering politics. Freedom House rates Zambia as only partly free. This is the Zambia of today, where ancient spirits meet modern politics, where Chinese money funds the mines while colonial laws lock up healers, and where 22 million people are trying to find a way out. It's a nation at a crossroads, and the path it takes in 2026 will be felt all across Africa. So the real question here isn't, is witchcraft real? It's, can democracy survive when politicians start using people's deepest spiritual beliefs as a weapon? Zambia is at a turning point, and what it decides to do next matters for everyone. As of right now, September 2025, nothing is resolved. The two men sentenced for witchcraft are serving their 2-year prison sentences, and their case has now set a legal precedent for going after anyone who makes a spiritual threat against a president. Edgar Lungu's body is still in that morgue in Pretoria. The court have said the government can bring him home, but his family is still fighting it. But the real story is bigger than just these two cases. Legal experts like Dr. Kate Silika are warning that if courts start accepting ritual objects as evidence, it risks institutionalizing a dangerous standard where cultural beliefs are weaponized for political purposes. President Hiroshima can deny believing in witchcraft all he wants, but it hasn't stopped the rumors. Social media is still buzzing with these supernatural stories. Young Zambians on TikTok are still asking why they are living under colonial laws. And that 79% of the population that believes in witchcraft, they are probably not changing their minds. To fix this, you need a delicate balance. You have to respect the people's traditions while also protecting democracy. Other countries have tried. Tanzania changed its laws, though it's still not perfect. Ghana is trying to shut down its witch camps. Some experts say they need special courts or mediators who can handle these accusations in a way that makes sense culturally. The 2026 elections are coming up fast. The opposition will almost certainly use this to say the government is out of touch with traditional values. The ruling party will talk about modernization, but they risk pushing away a huge number of voters. And the stakes are bigger than just Zambia. How the country handles this will be a lesson for the whole of the African continent. Can you successfully mix cultural heritage and democratic government? The world is watching. The election is coming. The colonial laws are still in effect. The beliefs run deep. And somewhere in a morgue in South Africa, Edgar Lungu is still waiting for his country to decide. Will Zambia be ruled by the living, or will the ghost of colonialism and the spirit of politics keep haunting its democracy? The spell isn't broken yet, but it could be. Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa. It's not every time I bring this kind of weird story, but I have a very special question for Zambians and anywhere that witchcraft and spiritual supernatural power has a very strong hold on a large population. Zambians, go to the comment section. Tell us exactly what is happening in your country. From the men arrested and jailed for being for practicing witchcraft to the crisis rocking the body of your former president. Tell us the reality on ground. Let us understand what is happening in Zambia. Now, if you want to see more of my videos, maybe consider to subscribe and turn up those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.